Welcome to Navigating Receiverships, a podcast from the Commercial Receivers Association, focused on building a better understanding of what brings companies into receivership, what happens in receivership, what makes them unique, some alternatives to receiverships, and ultimately, what happens to the business as the receivership is closed out. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Morcheski, CRA board member and CEO of Nimble Strategies. Welcome, everyone. Today we're here with Frank Simon, managing partner of Simon PLC, attorneys and counselors, also the lead receiver for the firm. Frank's been able to do a ton of receivership work over his career in a variety of industries. We're going to talk about one specifically today, but he has crossed so many bridges on that receivership and insolvency side. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, thank you, Eric, for hosting me today on this podcast. Much appreciated. So my background is I've been doing receivership work for over 25 years. I am an attorney, also a licensed broker, and licensed in Michigan, in Illinois, and New York. So I have a full practice in those states, and my law firm is also has attorneys and offices in different states. We're in 7 states in total. So receiverships and bank workouts has been my forte for over 25 years.
We've had the good pleasure of knowing each other for a little while now. I always wonder how you even keep up enough time with just keeping all your credentials up to date, that you have time to do all the work that you do as well. But you seem to have a good team of people working through these things. Today, we're going to talk a little bit in the healthcare space on a company that you took through a receivership. Can you kind of introduce the industry and what some of the problems were for the firm?
Absolutely. So this one was our really first, I would say, healthcare related receivership that I took over. I was appointed receiver on this matter. Probably now it's been 8 years or so ago. And the name of the company, it was called Arcadia Healthcare. Arcadia Healthcare. They were based out of Michigan, Southfield, Michigan, but had offices in like 8, 9 other states, doing business in various places. They had over 2,000 employees when I was appointed receiver. And this was a bank default. It was a local large bank default. It was actually at that time my largest receivership, both from a value of the default as well as the company itself being very large with 2,000 employees. As soon as I got appointed on this matter, I mean immediately I was on site and spoke to the top management. There was about maybe I would say 15 people who are top management of the company, the CEOs, CFOs, chief operating officers, head of HR, and so forth. And I met with all of them jointly and separately. That was like almost an entire day of just meeting with everyone and got to know what they do, got to know what their tasks are and responsibilities. We digested that for a few days and tried to then look at some of their books. I brought in a computer expert that came in, an IT guy, right? Soon thereafter, we went through all their IT computers to see if there was anything going on that was misappropriate. And he dug through that, and he did find certain things that were being done. An example is one of them was, some private jets access and use of from the monies of the business. And there was also a home purchased in Florida. So we uncovered the things that was inappropriate because of the bank default, under the covenants and loan documents. The CEO and the particular higher up people, they were not obviously supposed to be using monies from the company for personal use. Mm-hmm. And we did uncover that. We then hired a forensic accountant to come in as well to further review things. And yeah, so that was the first few weeks of operations that we learned of all this. So that was pretty unique.
I, I'm always curious, being that my background is accounting and finance. You brought in the IT expert first, and that's where you started finding, to me, I always start with where the money flowed, and then figure out, what that was purchasing after. So I probably do that in the reverse order, but when you're doing this through such a large entity, right, that 2,000 employees, Arcadia presumably had been operating for years and years and years.
Mhm.
There's so much data out there. How did you kind of even figure out where to start? I mean, that's obviously, you know, such a problem of, you probably can't go back to day one because of the years of history and the expanse of the issues. How did you kind of figure out where to go from there?
Yeah, definitely interesting question. We had suspicion. The bank actually had lots of suspicion before we were appointed. Obviously they were in default for a while before the appointment of the receiver. So the bank had, suspicion that there's things going on there that were inappropriate, and they kind of gave us some sort of a heads up that perhaps one needs to look at their financials, one needs to look at their IT areas, figure out what's what. I think they had a red flag, and so it helped us, of course, determine that maybe we should look into this right now rather than wait. That's what we did. I mean,
Mhm.
typically, right? I mean, usually you don't immediately get a forensic person in there. You don't immediately get an IT person in there. Sometimes the stuff takes months before you figure this out. We had that hunch, with the bank's help too, that we should probably not wait and just try to look into stuff immediately, because this company was doing so well for many years.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, I guess, the bank saw and we saw that things are just not going near as good as they were. And, we didn't understand why. And the monies were disappearing, the monies were short, and, it was going somewhere. And we just had to figure this out right away and not wait.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start, right? Was when you see
Right.
that change. And I think that change occurs, sometimes in small businesses or sometimes in startups. That change occurs from the start. And so you do have to go all the way back to the beginning. But in a larger company like this, you were able to identify, in partnership with the bank, you were able to identify where there was something that clearly said all things are good, and now things are starting to
Hmm.
head down that bad path. What were some of the other items that you had to take on when you were working through this receivership, because it was so large and because it was expansive, and also because it's in healthcare, and obviously there are a variety of things that need to be done that are a little different than if you were making widgets at a plant.
Right.
What were some of those unique pieces that you had to tackle while you were in as the receiver?
Yeah, exactly. And so because it's involved healthcare and involved medical records of people, this is extremely sensitive, and anything that we were looking at had to be secure. And so what we end up doing, we wanted to have a consultant, to bring a consultant on to help us through this process, which we did. I end up finding a consultant who knows the industry really well, who's been a prior CEO of other healthcare companies like this one.
Mhm.
And we kind of searched for people, we asked people, and interestingly enough, we end up finding someone that used to work at this company, was a prior CEO way back when, and that's who we got as our consultant. So we hired this consultant. I mean, I'm a big believer in hiring professionals, hiring people who know the industry, whatever industry that the receivership is in. My preference is always to get the expert in, to get
Mhm.
somebody that's very knowledgeable with certain asset classes like this one is. And so this new person that we got, the consultant, came in and helped us through this whole process. And then we actually end up naming this consultant as the interim CEO and fired the CEO that was there. But yeah, this interim CEO, really, this consultant, helped us through this healthcare laws and things that we had to be aware of, which was a lot, like the HIPAA, of course.
Yeah.
and a bunch of others.
I think you bring up a really good point in that it's something that we have discussions in the Commercial Receivers Association about it from time to time, but some judges want to appoint someone with industry experience for a receivership, whereas they maybe don't have the receivership experience. And I think the model you just laid out, I think from my perspective at least, is the correct model of hire the receivership professional and then bring in that industry experience as needed to play out the issues. Because at the time, all that you really know is you need a receivership. You haven't identified whether there are issues that need to be resolved by industry professionals or what those industry professionals might be. You brought in a CEO that ended up becoming the interim CEO of the company, but you didn't know if there were IT issues or HR issues. And so you could have ended up as a judge appointing a receiver with healthcare experience, but maybe they didn't have the right experience within the issues within the specific company. And so I think from my own perspective, at least you handled things really well by bringing in those professionals that can help you solve those problems as the receiver representing the judge. You went through these issues, you went through a lot of staffing issues. What made this unique as you went through everything?
Yeah, I mean, what made it unique is, we really had to fire, the top 10, 12 people at this place all within a few weeks. You could imagine the chaos, imagine the nervousness that employees had. Again, this is a company with 2,000 employees, and it wasn't as that simple. So we had to assure the rest of the managers. We met with the managers, assure them that this company is not closing, this
Mm-hmm.
company is not shutting down, that we are here to keep the company going, and we're just changing the personnel, changing the leadership, and kind of helping this company actually grow and do better. And so that was a big deal because a lot of people were rightfully nervous about whether or not they're going to lose their jobs. Should they be looking elsewhere? And so we try to assure everybody not to worry. This company will keep going, and that's what we did. We really kept the company going. We actually increased revenue, got it stabilized, and that was really I think an important factor.
When you bring up a really nice point there of so many people think of receivership as a wind down. So many people think of it as you're closing the company and maybe just liquidating the assets and leaving as the receiver, but that wasn't the path you chose to take when you went through this. Did that ever come up in conversations where you might have to liquidate or might have to sell it off? Or was there always a clear, if we can correct these four, five, 176 problems, whatever there was going on,
Yeah.
that we can really make this a working entity again?
I mean, I think we didn't know at that time whether or not we could keep this company going, that we could keep this company intact. But, the goal was to do that, to keep the value there. There was so much debt outstanding that the bank had.
Mm.
And obviously, if this company was, had to be wind down or liquidated, it would have been, not a good result for the lender,
Mhm.
particularly, and for the employees, really. The employees. I mean, these employees were a lot of them were there for many years, and they enjoyed it working at this company. So the last thing I think that they wanted was, to shut down. So we
Mhm.
end up really doing the opposite. We end up making the place better, increasing value, keeping it stabilized, and then ultimately we did sell it out to a REIT.
Okay.
So a REIT ended up buying it, but they kept everything in place. They kept all the employees in place, and it actually turned out to be well and good for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great outcome, and hopefully something that others can take away as they work through their own receivership practices. So you went through all of this. What were some of the lessons that you learned? Obviously, you talked about early on that this was the biggest receivership you had taken on at that time, both from a default standpoint and from an employee standpoint. What were some of the takeaways that you had as you went through this and as you wrapped it up?
Yeah, a lot of it, I think some of the takeaways was to try to get somebody that's a good partner to buy these companies, Because the last thing you want to is somebody that would just buy it and then try to shut it down or try to liquidate themselves or do certain things that are in a negative fashion. We end up talking to various people and found this great company out of Texas, Dallas, Texas, large company that's in that business. And we end up, going to the court and asking the court for permission and explain to the court that we've had other offers, but this offer is the best offer, the best company to keep this place intact. The other folks, we were not sure if they would keep this place intact or not. There's some 2,000 employees, and a lot of folks, that's their livelihood.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm actually going through that in a receivership right now, where we're talking about not necessarily from an employee standpoint, but best offer doesn't always mean highest offer.
Correct.
And so, trying to identify so that you can justify it to the judge as to why one offer might be better than another, because
Hmm.
just because you feel something is better doesn't mean you can articulate it. And so I think it's always something that needs to be kept in mind, especially when you're going through an insolvency action. Obviously, secured creditors may say, "I just want the most money back, so figure out how to get me that," and and I don't care
Right.
about the rest. But that's you when you have 2,000 employees that you're caring for as the receiver, you have to take in some of those other factors as well, and not just the monetary side of it. Now, obviously, the monetary side plays a role in it, and if one offers 10% of the highest offer, you probably can't justify it. But as long as they're somewhat in the same ballpark, then you start to look at what those other factors
Yeah.
might be, how they might play a role in it.
So true.
From an outsider looking in, whether it's the bank that you worked with or some of the other attorneys, obviously, that were involved, you know, what were some of those takeaways that you feel some of those outsiders looking in should consider as they, maybe have a loan in default to a major healthcare company, or they're advising a loan in default from a bank or someone else?
Yeah, I think Eric, you kind of touched upon something earlier, which makes good sense. You need the right receiver to know how to manage in getting the right experts in place when need be. I think at the end of the day, like you said earlier, it's more important getting the right receiver in there without regard to the asset class or the type of industry, and have this receiver be the one that really is able to or has experience of going out and getting the experts in and hiring or getting consultants in who kind of know the industries pretty well. I mean, there's not going to be, many receivers who just know healthcare, right?
Mhm.
Who just knows cannabis, but it's all about having the quarterback. A receiver is a quarterback to some degree, where this quarterback would go and just get the appropriate people to help out on the team and get the result that's needed.
Yeah, knowing who and then also when, right? And that,
Right?
sometimes it makes sense to engage a forensic accountant, and sometimes it doesn't.
Doesn't
Uh,
exactly.
sometimes you're going to bring in that IT expert, and sometimes you're not, and sometimes you're not
Right.
going to bring them in at first, but you're going to bring them in later on. And so,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, maybe you're the offensive coordinator to the judge being the head coach, or
That's
whatever you
right.
want to
That,
look at it.
that's right.
The judge is ultimately in charge, but you still need that coordinator to, oversee when the players go into the game and to make sure that the right players are going in, and anything else. So I really appreciate you doing this. Is there anything that you would like to leave people with as you wrap up this podcast?
No, not really. It just, I think I would say that, having the right receiver that has like that good judgment call, the good gut feelings, who have the experience level, and not afraid to take on certain things that maybe is out of the normal arena, like this was. I mean, this was my first one involving a large healthcare company as a receiver. I've never been involved before, but it's all about, like you say, it's all about getting the right team in place and coordination. And I believe having the right receiver that could do that is really something that is a great asset.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank you,
for
Eric.
your support of the CRA and your role as the Michigan State Director and everything else you do, but also for the good work you do within the industry. So We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate the CRA. I appreciate you're always out there and working on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you for joining Navigating Receiverships, brought to you by the Commercial Receivers Association. Find more information at commercialreceiver.org and catch every Navigating Receiverships podcast by subscribing through your favorite platform today.